everybody. Can you see yourselves in the screen?
Yes.
Yep, all right. So we have people here.
We actually have more people here tonight, but not the same ones that came last time. I think we scared them away. Hopefully not.
Oh, you did.
Okay, so tonight I'm going to preach a sermon that I entitled His Arm is Extended. Not that you necessarily needed to know that. But I'm going to go ahead and read the passage, and then we'll get started. So this is Matthew 14, 22 through 33 from the New Revised Standard Version. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So this is a pretty incredible, miraculous encounter that we have with Jesus in this passage. His whole purpose of coming to earth was to save us. And he shows that very clearly through the activity that we see in this passage. And Jesus didn't just come to the earth and say, "Oh, I'm just going to reach my hand in here and try not to get hurt and hopefully save somebody and not get bitten by this brood of vipers here. I'll just reach in and hope to get someone." No, he jumped headlong in. He said, "I'm all in." And he gave his life. He poured out his life, and then he gave his life. And throughout his earthly ministry, he reveals himself through all of these actions that he does on our behalf, on human beings' behalves. And those who reject him, we see over and over again, they become more blind, more deaf, more hardened, and ultimately are not able to receive the deliverance and salvation he's desiring to give them. Those that respond by repenting and believing, responding in faith, saying, "Yes, I want this, I believe that this is from God," those people, they're never put to shame. They see incredible things happen, like in this passage, where he just reveals things that they'd not even thought of before. They're never just disappointed, the people who wait on him and watch for his salvation. Now, our passage here, Matthew 14, 22 through 33, what I want to do is I want to talk about 3 saving acts. Now, one of them isn't actually in this passage. It precedes this passage, but it's alluded to in this passage. And then there's 2 that are very clearly in this passage. And through reflecting on these saving acts that Jesus does on behalf of his disciples, on the world around him, I want us to consider, where is Jesus acting in our lives? I want us to look at these activities that he did during his life on the earth, and then look at our lives and say, where is he acting? Where is he moving? Where is he seeking my best? Where is he seeking my deliverance? Because often it's in really unexpected ways, like in this passage. So no matter how impossible our circumstances may seem, Christ is always working for our salvation, and nothing is beyond the reach of his power. So I just want us to look at that. Let's see where he's at work. So let's consider the first saving act. This is the one alluded to in our passage. So immediately before this, in Matthew 14, 13 through 21, at the beginning of chapter 14, Jesus has just heard that John the Baptist was put to death. Okay, that's a little bit unsettling. John the Baptist was following the Lord, was doing everything that God had told him to do. He was baptizing. We don't really hear examples of him healing and doing miracles, but he was seen as a supernatural person. He was doing incredible acts that people saw as being from heaven. So Jesus knows that if the world treated John the Baptist this way, he is newly aware of what his destiny is. The world around Jesus rejected John the Baptist, even killing him. They're going to do the same to him. And as soon as he hears of this, he's like, I've got to get some alone time. I need to hear from my Father. I need to hear his perspective. I need to get his peace again. Because we often think of Jesus as being kind of this emotionally invincible person. Like, well, he's God. Nothing bothered him. But we forget that he took on fully, he took on human flesh. And you can bet, like you can see the evidence in this passage. He was disturbed, and he needed some time. He needed some time to refresh. So I didn't actually read this part of the story to you, but you can go look at it later. Basically, Jesus tries to get on a boat, get away from people. As soon as he gets back on the shore, there's like this huge crowd waiting for him. And he's, I would be thinking, oh no, I don't have it right now. Give me some space. In fact, that's how I was feeling not too long ago. But seminary does that to you, and life does that to you, as all of you know. But Jesus, what's his response? Just a few chapters before, he had identified the crowds as harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. He sees them and immediately has compassion on them, starts healing their sick. He doesn't even hesitate. He's just like, okay, I'm going to help these people because he can't help himself. That's why he's here. He's here to save. So, I'm probably getting lost. Okay, there we are. He doesn't turn them away. And not only does he not turn them away, he's exhausted, right? And then he does like the most incredible miracle that he's done so far in Matthew's gospel. He feeds 5,000 people from just a few loaves and fish. They had never seen something like this before. So those times when we're like, I am literally at my worst, those are sometimes the times that the Lord's like, well, I'm ready to pour out my power in ways you've never imagined before. And that's what happens here. Jesus is like, yeah, I'm tired. Okay, whoops, I just fed 5,000 people. And he was fully human like us, right? So I already said that. He was not immune from emotional and physical exhaustion. He was not immune from feeling like kind of this dread of like what was coming in his life. He was dreading this end. In the end, he submits to the Father's will, but remember, in tears and with blood and sweat, he says, is there any other way? Is there any other way to save the world? He sees that in the future right now. But he sacrifices his own interests and well-being to minister to this crowd. So let's draw out a couple implications of this for us. This story reminds us that Jesus never refuses to help those who come to him. Never. He's not going to stop displaying his saving acts. In his lifetime, he wasn't willing to do it just because he was feeling overwhelmed by what he'd heard about John. He was going to keep doing what he does, saving. If we come to him in need, we can be confident that he will have compassion for us. He's never going to be like, oh, that's just a little thing. You can handle that. Or, oh, that's too big. We're going to have to wait a little while and pat you on the head and send you away. He is always going to be moved with compassion, and he is always going to provide what you need in that moment, what we need. We can be confident that we won't go away empty-handed. Okay, so that's our saving act number 1. We'll get back to some more things about that. Saving act number 2. This is pretty big. He walked on water. That's pretty darn huge. So after Jesus displays his salvation to these crowds, he turns his attention to his disciples, for whom he will display the second act that I just described. Jesus is concerned that they begin their journey across the sea. He obviously was motivated by needing alone time. He wanted to go up on that mountain alone. Maybe he saw that they needed some time alone, apart from him, apart from the crowds. But he also probably saw that wind was coming, strong wind was coming. So he wants them to get a head start. So Jesus takes care of these final greetings, these final handshakes, these final hugs. This crowd that has just seen this incredible provision of God. He does those final send-aways, and then he goes up and prays alone. Meanwhile, while Jesus is having this good time with his Father, the disciples are struggling at sea. The wind and the waves have picked up, and they're starting to think things like maybe we have thought before. okay, Jesus, you sent me here. Why is this happening? You sent us across the sea. And you knew that this storm was going on, and you knew that we were going to struggle, and look, you're not here. Where are you? Don't we often ask questions like that when the Lord sends us into situations? We know He sent us, and yet here we are struggling. Where are you? So we as the readers, then we go on and we say, okay, look, He waited until the morning to come to them. He surely knew that they were struggling even that night. And yes, He was tired. Yes, He needed alone time. But you saw how He responded to the crowds. It was immediate. It was like not even a hesitation. Yet with the disciples, He's biding His time a little bit. So why does He wait to act sometimes? This is a question that emerges for me when I'm reading about this miracle. Why does God wait to act? This is a great mystery. For instance, why did God let Joseph suffer for so many years before raising him up in Egypt? Why did He let Jesus get crucified? I mean, He could have turned the hearts that were turned against Him. He had the power to do so. He didn't. Why, as believers, why does Jesus talk about persecution in our lives as we follow Him? Why does He talk about struggle? Why does He talk about taking up our cross? These are hard questions, and I'm not going to try to answer them completely, but I think that this passage is telling us something about that. What we do know is that God takes each of these puzzling situations and turns them into opportunities to display His salvation. For instance, if Joseph had never suffered all those years, then Canaan and Egypt wouldn't have been spared the effects of famine. If Jesus hadn't suffered and died and rose again, we wouldn't be here. We would have no hope. Suffering and death would be our final word. But He took it on so that won't be our final word. And those of us who take up our cross daily and follow Christ, we will face innumerable struggles that the Lord has sent us there, and He knows we will face them. We're in a fallen world. We're going to face all sorts of troubles from people, from spiritual principalities, from our own sin and selfishness. But at each of these moments, this is an opportunity for Him to come to us. Just like He came to the disciples when He walked out on the sea. He came directly into their anxiety, directly into their fear. And He said, don't be afraid. It's me. Yes, He waited, and the disciples could have said, why did you wait so long? Like we often do. But they were happy to see Him. Peter was a little concerned. He still thought, he wasn't sure it was Jesus, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I'm sure that they were just happy to be out of the trouble. And we are too, when He comes for us. But I know for myself, I struggle with offense sometimes. God, why did you wait 8 years to do this? Why did you wait 2 months to do this? Whatever it is. Some of us, there are things we're dealing with that it might be until the next life. That's how long it might take. But He is coming to us. And He comes to us even today, every day, in the things that we are facing. So Jesus lets the disciples struggle against the wind at sea, but He saves them in the most seemingly impossible way. I mean, He walks on the water, guys. They weren't expecting that. I mean, what way is He coming to us that we don't expect? I can't even think of it, because it would be something I'd never seen before. And He solved the problem they were facing by just showing up. He literally just got into the boat and the wind stopped. And that's how it is. When He shows up, that's it. When He has called us into difficult situations, He will display His power to bring us to a successful end. He called us, He will bring us to a successful end. He doesn't promise it will be easy in the meantime, but we have the grand opportunity of seeing Him show off, basically. Because He never promised it would be easy, but we can expect Him to intervene at every single turn. So that brings us to the last saving act in this passage, Peter's rescue. I find this part humorous. It used to bother me quite a bit. And I'll get more into that in a moment, but I just find it interesting. Peter's like, I'm not sure if that's you, Jesus. How about you just tell me to come out there with you? Like, I don't really see how he got to that point. I mean, what if it was a ghost? And he's like, just that's a good way to die. But he obviously had enough faith to say, I'm pretty sure that's Jesus. I'm not really sure what motivated him to do this. But I think it's pretty awesome that Jesus is like, sure, he obliges his interest and his curiosity. So perhaps in a stroke of good humor, Christ says, sure, come on out here. And Peter does actually walk on water for a few moments. We're often hard on Peter, like, oh, he sunk because he didn't have enough faith. Have you ever walked on water for a few steps? I'm thinking no. So I think it's pretty awesome. He kept his eyes on Jesus and actually walked on water with him. But then he was overtaken by all the other stimuli around him, like we often are in our lives today. Jesus says, okay, come on, let's do this. We're looking at him, we're doing great. And then all of a sudden, it's like, what have I gotten myself into?
Oh, yeah.
And stuff just kind of washes over us, and we feel like we're dying. I'm sure we all could name at least 5 to 10 circumstances that have felt like that in our lives, like off the top of our head. But, okay, so Peter's lack of faith occasions him sinking. And he cries out for help. He knows that there's only one source of salvation. Lord, help me. Lord, help me. And that's all we have to say. And that's all he had to say. And the response was immediate. It was, okay. He just grabbed him. Even though Peter's doubt and fear is what occasioned it. Jesus didn't stop while he was drowning for 5 to 10 minutes and give him a lecture about how he shouldn't have doubted and feared. He pulled him up and then said, you have little faith, why did you doubt? And I can almost imagine him saying that with a little bit of humor in his eyes. He didn't expect anything more. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Like, he walked on water for a few steps. And I think often we think the Lord's going to condemn us because we followed him into something that truly is impossible for a human being. Truly, like, it is not possible for us to walk on water. He calls us into situations that are impossible for us, sometimes. Literally impossible. He knows we're going to fall without his help. He's not expecting anything else. He does expect us to take hold of his help. But his kindness, when we don't measure up to, we probably hold ourselves under a harder standard than he does. You know, we think we have to be this perfect spiritual giant. And, oh, he's calling me to do this cool thing, this hard thing, and I have to show him how mature I am, and I have to show others how mature I am. And he's just like, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for trusting me enough to try. And I'm here to pick you up when you fall. That is really his heart toward us. So Christ won't hesitate in every situation in our lives. He's not going to hesitate. Even if our own foolish choices or sin have left us in a situation where we're sinking. He's not going to leave us there. He is always ready to save us. Always ready to save those of us who call on his name. So there's a lot of information there. Probably could have been 3 different sermons. But I felt like I wanted to just kind of do a run through of these 3 saving acts that are 3 in a row. And just in the context of what was going on in Jesus' life. It's amazing to me. When I really think about it, I fall in love with him more and more. Looking at the word, looking at what he has done. He's had quite an interesting couple of days. I mean, if I had had this couple of days, those types of things wouldn't have happened. It would have been more sinking and less walking. But his mind is preoccupied. We've already talked about this. He is grieving. He's grieving that his cousin has died. He's grieving something even greater than that. He's grieving that there are those in the world around him, and even today, all through history, who will never understand that they are sick, like the crowd, and that they need healing. Who will never understand that they're going to starve to death without him providing food. So he is delighting to save these people who are coming to him, but he's grieved because he knows that what they did to John the Baptist, that signals that there is this whole group of humanity that is going to reject his salvation, and it's going to lead to his death. Mm-hmm. He's grieving that there are many struggling against strong headwinds in life, like the disciples were struggling against the winds on the sea in their boat. And they need him to show up like he showed up walking on water. And yet, those people they'll never see him show up. They might even continue to say, oh, that's just a ghost, and not even let him get in the boat. And that there are others who are sinking like Peter was, and they'll just die. Because they won't cry out for help. They won't say, Lord, save me. He's grieved for those reasons. And though Jesus needed some time to reflect with his Father after hearing about John the Baptist's death, he doesn't stop. He doesn't even slow down his saving activity. He never stopped displaying the fullness of his heart for us, even when in the background of his mind, you can just see it all over his actions in that chapter. He's just grieving. He's grieving, and yet he's giving. Grieving and giving because he loves us that much. So let's be among those who respond to Christ's saving acts. So let's not be those that Christ was grieving would not respond. Let's be those that are like the crowds, like the disciples, like Peter, who received what he was doing, who saw who he really was, who were able to exclaim, truly you are the Son of the living God. And were able to come to him for not only salvation in these physical situations that were facing them, but for eternal salvation and for deliverance from demonic strongholds. For every type of level of salvation, I could say, they were able to turn from their own attempts to save themselves and turn toward him. Let's be among them. If we come to him like the crowds, we will never go away empty. If we come to him, if we let him come to us on the water, he's going to calm the wind and waves. And if we're sinking in water, the circumstances that he has called us into, and we're sinking, all we have to do is ask for help, and he is there. He is mighty to save. Salvation will grab us immediately by the hand. So this evening, I know that we're probably not going to have as much time to do this. I need to stop soon. But I want to invite us to receive from the Lord. So I just want to invite us into a time of prayer. And if there's any aspect of your life in which you feel the need for Christ's saving power, I just want to encourage you to think about how Christ responded to the crowds, how Christ responded to his disciples, how he responded to Peter. I just want you to receive from him right now. And maybe reflect upon, how is he coming to you? How have you come to him? What have you asked of him? And what is his response? How is he displaying his saving power right now in your life? And if you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know how he's doing that because I've been waiting a long time and I'm not seeing him come through for me. Just remember Christ on that mountain waiting until the morning to come to his disciples in the boat while they were struggling against the wind. Remember that he is coming, and he's coming in the way you would least expect in a lot of instances. He sees and feels your struggle and is coming to you even now. So I just want to invite us to receive, let him come to us, and we come to you, Jesus. And we just say, Lord, save. Lord, save. You are our only hope. You poured out your life even unto death, Jesus, for the world, even when you knew the world was against you. Much of the world would reject you. And you continue to come for your people, even though much of the world rejects you today. We receive your help. We receive your salvation because we believe that you are the Son of the living God. You are the only Savior of the world. And we thank you that even when life was really hard, you endured to the end so that we could be saved. In your earthly life and ministry, when it was hard, so hard, You didn't give up because you saw the prize, and that prize was us being yours forever. And we really can never thank you enough. Thank you, Jesus. In your name.